They were the couple everyone envied, a beautiful, wealthy power duo living a life most could only dream of. Kehlani Briscoe, a self-made millionaire, and Omari Hargrove, her charming, picture-perfect husband. Their wedding was nothing short of a fairy tale, and their honeymoon, a luxury escape to paradise. But by the time the sun rose over their breathtaking villa in Bali, the dream had turned into a nightmare. Two lovers lay butchered in cold blood, and the bride was the only one left standing. What happened that night? What could push a woman who seemingly had it all to commit an act so brutal, so unthinkable? Was it a crime of passion? A carefully planned act of revenge? Or was there something far more sinister lurking beneath the surface? This is the chilling story of Kehlani Briscoe, a woman whose perfect life crumbled in a single moment of betrayal, leading to a night of bloodshed that the world would never forget. Before we uncover the shocking truth behind this honeymoon massacre, make sure to like this video and subscribe, where love, lies, and betrayal turn fatal. Kehlani Briscoe had everything: a thriving real estate empire, a life of luxury, and a reputation as one of Atlanta's most powerful self-made women. At 29, she was fierce, independent, and utterly untouchable. She built her business from the ground up, turning small investments into multi-million-dollar deals. Her success wasn't just impressive, it was legendary. She wasn't the type to be played, the type to be fooled. At least, that's what everyone thought. But then came Omari Hargrove. 3 years ago, Kehlani walked into an exclusive Buckhead gym, looking for a personal trainer. And that's where she met him, Omari, 31 years old, with a body sculpted to perfection, a smile that could disarm even the most guarded woman, and a charm that felt effortless. He knew how to make women feel special, like they were the only ones in the world. And for the first time in a long time, Kehlani let her guard down. Omari played his role perfectly. He was attentive, affectionate, and knew exactly what to say to make Kehlani feel like she had finally met her match. Their chemistry was electric, undeniable. What started as a simple trainer-client relationship quickly became something more. Dinners at the most exclusive restaurants, spontaneous trips to exotic locations, and nights filled with passion that left Kehlani breathless. She wasn't the kind of woman who needed a man, but Omari made her want him. The world saw them as the perfect couple. Kehlani, the boss who had built her own empire, and Omari, the devoted man who stood by her side. Social media worshipped them. Couple goals, people called them. Omari never missed a chance to publicly show his love, lavish surprises, heartfelt Instagram posts, the way he looked at her like she was his entire world. It was the kind of love story that seemed almost too good to be true. And maybe, it was. Their engagement was nothing short of a spectacle. An extravagant proposal in Santorini, Greece, captured perfectly for the world to see. Kehlani, in a designer dress, tears of joy streaming down her face as Omari got down on one knee, presenting a diamond so massive it could be seen from across the room. The world swooned. The wedding was next, and it promised to be the kind of event people would talk about for years. But what no one knew was that beneath the picture-perfect romance, something dark was already brewing. A betrayal so deep, so vile, that it would soon turn their fairy tale into a waking nightmare. Jalisa Moore had been Kehlani Briscoe's best friend for over a decade. They met in college, two ambitious young women who had big dreams and even bigger personalities. They had been through everything together: late-night study sessions, heartbreaks, career milestones. When Kehlani started her real estate empire, Jalisa was right there, cheering her on. And when Jalisa launched her own event planning business, Kehlani was her biggest supporter. To everyone who knew them, their bond was unbreakable, a sisterhood built on trust. But beneath the smiles and champagne toasts, Jalisa carried a secret that would one day destroy everything. Jealousy. Jalisa never said it out loud, not even to herself. But deep down, she resented Kehlani. Kehlani was the one who always seemed to win, effortlessly beautiful, wildly successful, admired by everyone. Jaleesa had worked just as hard, but her life never seemed to shine as brightly. Her business was doing fine, but it was nothing compared to Kehlani's empire. And when Kehlani met Omari, a man who looked like he had been carved by the gods, something inside Jaleesa twisted. It wasn't fair. Kehlani already had everything, why did she get the perfect man, too? The first time Jaleesa laid eyes on Omari was at Kehlani's mother's birthday party, 2 years before the wedding. He was standing next to Kehlani, arm wrapped around her waist, looking at her like she was his whole world. That should have been enough for Jaleesa to back off, to respect the friendship they had built for years. But instead, it awakened something dark in her. She wanted him. And worse, she wanted to take him from Kehlani. It started small. A lingering touch when she greeted him, a playful comment about his muscles, a little too much eye contact. Omari noticed, of course. He was used to women throwing themselves at him, but this was different. This was his fiancée's best friend. That should have been enough to stop him, but it wasn't. The thrill of secrecy, the danger of what they were doing, it was intoxicating. Jaleesa made the first move. She started showing up at Omari's gym, pretending she needed a trainer, but all she really wanted was time alone with him. She texted him late at night, messages that started off innocent but became something else entirely. And then, one drunken night at a friend's party, it happened. The first kiss. A stolen moment in a dark hallway, her hands in his hair, his breath hot against her skin. They both knew it was wrong, but neither of them wanted to stop. And they didn't. For 2 years, they carried on a secret affair behind Kehlani's back. It wasn't just passion, it was a game. Jaleesa got a twisted thrill from the betrayal, from knowing she had something Kehlani didn't. And Omari? Omari loved the attention. He had no intention of leaving Kehlani, she was his meal ticket, his financial security. But Jaleesa was something different, something reckless and exciting. They met in hotels, in her condo, and even in the guest room of Kehlani's own mansion while she was away on business trips. Every time they swore it would be the last, but it never was. Lust always won. Through it all, Jaleesa played the part of the perfect best friend. She listened to Kehlani gush about wedding plans, helped pick out the perfect dress, even stood beside her as the maid of honor on the big day. She held Kehlani's hand, wiped away happy tears, and gave a heartfelt toast about true love, knowing all along that she had already shattered it. And Kehlani? She never suspected a thing. But secrets like these don't stay buried forever. And when the truth finally came to light, it didn't just destroy friendships, it led to bloodshed. Because no one betrays Kehlani Briscoe and walks away unscathed. Paradise. That's what Bali was supposed to be, a dream honeymoon, the perfect start to forever. The private villa overlooked crystal-clear waters, the air was thick with the scent of jasmine, and the world felt like it belonged to them. Kehlani and Omari had spent the past 3 days indulging in luxury, sunbathing on white sand beaches, sipping cocktails by the infinity pool, making love under the stars. On the surface, they were the picture of newlywed bliss. But on the third night, everything changed. Kehlani woke up to an unfamiliar silence. The bed beside her was empty, the sheets cold where Omari should have been. She sat up, blinking in the darkness, listening for any sign of him. Maybe he'd gone to get water. Maybe he was outside, taking in the warm night air. But then, she heard it. A muffled sound. A whisper. A moan. Her heartbeat quickened. The sounds weren't coming from outside. They were coming from inside the villa. Barefoot, she moved down the dimly lit hallway, following the noises to the guest room. The door was cracked open, and through the sliver of space, she could see shadows moving. A low, breathless laugh. A name whispered in the dark. She pushed the door open. And there they were. Omari. Jaleesa. Tangled together in bed, bodies slick with sweat, mouths locked in desperate kisses. The same bed where just hours earlier, Kehlani and Omari had made love. They were so lost in each other, so consumed by their betrayal, that they didn't even see her standing there. Watching. Kehlani didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, her breath slowing, her hands curling into fists at her sides. The world around her seemed to blur, sounds fading, her pulse hammering like war drums in her ears. She felt something inside her snap, something primal, something irreversible. She turned and walked to the kitchen. The butcher knife felt heavy in her hand, its cool steel pressing against her palm. She stood there for a moment, staring at her reflection in the gleaming blade. A woman she no longer recognized stared back. A woman who had given everything, her love, her trust, her loyalty, only to have it spat on, discarded like she was nothing. They thought they could humiliate her. They thought she would just take it. They thought she was weak. They were wrong. When she returned to the room, she didn't creep in like a thief. She didn't hesitate. She let out a scream so raw, so guttural, that it sent a shockwave of terror through them. Jaleesa gasped, her head snapping toward the door, eyes widening in horror. Omari scrambled up, his mouth opening to speak, but the words never came. Because by then, Kehlani was already on him. The first stab landed between his shoulder blades, slicing through muscle and severing his spinal cord. Omari collapsed onto the bed, his body twitching, his limbs useless. His mouth moved, but no sound came out except for a strangled gurgle. Jaleesa shrieked and tried to run, but Kehlani was faster. With one swift motion, she grabbed Jaleesa by her thick, sweat-dampened hair and yanked her backward. The knife cut deep into her throat, severing arteries, silencing her forever. Blood sprayed against the silk sheets, against the walls, against Kehlani's skin. Omari lay there, helpless, forced to watch as the woman he had betrayed took her time. Kehlani climbed onto the bed, straddling him, her knife glinting under the moonlight. His lips trembled, his eyes wet with terror, but there was no mercy left in her. "You ruined everything," she whispered, her voice eerily calm. She carved the word "whore" into his chest, slow and deliberate, making sure he felt every cut. His choked cries filled the room, but he couldn't fight back. He couldn't do anything but suffer. And then, when she had taken everything from him, his strength, his dignity, his breath, she delivered the final blow. A deep, precise slice across his throat, ending it all. By the time she stood up, the room was drenched in blood. The air was thick with the metallic scent of death. She looked down at them, the two people who had betrayed her in the worst way possible, and felt nothing. No regret. No sadness. No fear. Because in that moment, Kehlani Briscoe wasn't a heartbroken wife. She was vengeance itself. The villa was silent when they found her. Security had been called after another guest, staying just a few doors down, reported strange noises. A scream. Something that sounded like furniture breaking. And then, nothing. Just an eerie stillness that sent chills down their spine. When the hotel staff arrived, they hesitated before unlocking the door. It was protocol to check on guests, but something about this felt different. The air inside the villa was thick, suffocating, like the walls themselves had absorbed something unholy. And then they saw her. Kehlani Briscoe sat on the edge of the bed, her silk robe soaked in blood. Her hands, her arms, even her face, splattered with deep crimson. The knife rested loosely in her grip, the blade reflecting the dim light from the chandelier above. She didn't flinch when the security team rushed in. She didn't even look up. Her lips moved, whispering something over and over. They ruined everything. The words barely left her lips, a broken mantra, spoken to no one and everyone at once. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. When the officers entered, guns drawn, shouting at her to drop the weapon, she simply lifted her gaze, eyes empty, hollow, and placed the knife on the bedside table. She raised her hands in surrender, blood smearing her wrists as she whispered again. They ruined everything. What the police found inside that room was something out of a horror film. Omari Hargrove lay sprawled across the floor, his once athletic body now nothing more than a lifeless husk. The white sheets beneath him had turned red, soaked through with the blood that had poured from his open throat. Deep, jagged slashes covered his torso, each one more brutal than the last. But it wasn't just the wounds that horrified detectives, it was the word carved into his chest. Whore. Jaleesa Moore was barely recognizable. Her body lay twisted beside him, her throat slashed so deeply that she was nearly decapitated. The white silk nightgown she wore was stained dark, her lifeless eyes frozen in an expression of pure terror. A pillow, still damp with her blood, rested just inches from her outstretched hand, suggesting that at some point, Kehlani had tried to muffle her screams. This wasn't just a crime of passion. This was rage. This was personal. And the woman responsible? She sat motionless on the blood-soaked bed, waiting to be taken away. News of the shocking Honeymoon murders spread like wildfire. Millionaire bride murders husband and best friend in honeymoon bloodbath. From newlywed to notorious, the shocking crimes of Kehlani Briscoe. Honeymoon in hell, betrayal, lust, and murder in Bali. The media couldn't get enough. Kehlani Briscoe, once the epitome of success and sophistication, was now a worldwide spectacle. The internet was divided. Some saw her as a scorned woman pushed beyond her breaking point, while others viewed her as a cold-blooded killer who had let rage consume her. True crime forums exploded with theories. Had she planned it all along? Had she known about the affair before the wedding and used the honeymoon as a trap? Or had she truly snapped in the heat of the moment? Some pointed to her success as evidence that she was always calculating, always in control. Others argued that the very betrayal she suffered had triggered a psychological break. And then there was the betrayal itself. Jaleesa Moore had been more than just a friend. She was Kehlani's sister in every way but blood. The woman she trusted to stand beside her at the altar. To hold her secrets. To celebrate her success. And yet, for 2 years, Jaleesa had been sleeping with Omari behind her back. Stealing moments in the shadows. Laughing, smiling in her face while sharing her husband's bed. And Omari, her groom, her love, the man she had believed in, had let it happen. Some people sympathized with Kehlani. They saw her as a woman scorned, a wife betrayed in the cruelest way. Others called her a monster. A murderer who had acted not out of heartbreak, but cold, calculated rage. The ultimate act of control. In the days that followed, Kehlani underwent a full psychological evaluation. Her defense team argued that she had suffered a temporary break, a moment of uncontrollable emotion triggered by years of trust being shattered in an instant. A psychiatrist testified that she had entered a state of dissociative rage, acting on pure instinct rather than rational thought. But the prosecution saw things differently. They painted Kehlani as a woman who had spent her life in control, of her business, of her image, of her relationships. They argued that she hadn't simply snapped. She had made a choice. A deliberate, merciless decision to erase the people who had wronged her. And the knife wounds, the methodical, almost ritualistic nature of the attack, proved it. She didn't just kill them, she made them suffer. They pointed to the word carved into Omari's chest as evidence of premeditation. Kehlani hadn't just been overcome by emotion, she had taken her time. She had made a statement. And when it was done, she hadn't run. She hadn't tried to hide. She had simply sat there, covered in their blood, waiting to be found. As the trial approached, one question loomed over everything: was Kehlani Briscoe the victim of an unbearable betrayal? Or had she always been something far more dangerous? The courtroom was packed. Every seat filled, every hallway crowded with reporters and spectators hungry for the final chapter of the Honeymoon murders. Cameras flashed as Kehlani Briscoe was led inside, her wrists shackled, her once glamorous life reduced to an orange jumpsuit and chains. But even now, she held her head high, her face unreadable. She had been many things: a self-made millionaire, a devoted fiancée, the picture of success. But today, she was something else entirely. A murderer on trial. The prosecution wasted no time painting Kehlani as a woman scorned who had turned her rage into something monstrous. They laid out the evidence with brutal precision, leaving nothing to the imagination. Crime scene photos flashed across the screen, each one more horrifying than the last. Blood-soaked sheets. Deep, gaping wounds. The word carved into Omari's chest. A message written in flesh. This wasn't a crime of passion, the prosecutor told the jury. This was revenge. They argued that Kehlani had time to walk away. She could have screamed, cried, left the room, but instead, she had chosen to kill. She had gone to the kitchen, retrieved the largest knife she could find, and returned with murder in her heart. And when she struck, she didn't stop. She had made sure Omari and Jaleesa felt every ounce of her fury before they died. This was not the act of a woman who lost control, the prosecutor continued. This was the act of a woman who wanted them to suffer. Kehlani's defense team fought back, arguing that the betrayal had triggered something primal inside her, a temporary psychotic break, a moment of uncontrollable emotion. They brought in a psychiatrist who testified that Kehlani had entered a fugue state, her mind fractured by the shock of seeing her husband and best friend in bed together. According to the expert, she had not been fully aware of her actions until the blood was already on her hands. But the jury wasn't convinced. Not when the prosecution revealed the chilling details, the methodical nature of the attack, the precision of the wounds, the way Kehlani had carved a word into Omari's chest before delivering the final blow. Temporary insanity didn't explain that. Temporary insanity didn't explain the way she sat there afterward, calm, composed, waiting to be found. And then there were the words. They ruined everything. The same words she whispered when security entered the villa. The same words she muttered under her breath during her arrest. The same words caught on the police recording as they led her into custody. Not the words of a woman who had blacked out. Not the words of someone who didn't know what they had done. But the words of someone who had made a decision, and followed through. The trial lasted 3 weeks, but the jury needed only 6 hours to decide. When the verdict was read, the room was silent. We, the jury, find the defendant, Kehlani Briscoe, guilty of double homicide. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Kehlani didn't flinch. No tears. No reaction. Just the same eerie calm she had carried since the night of the murders. The judge, unimpressed by her composure, delivered the sentence swiftly and without mercy. Kehlani Briscoe, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The gavel slammed down. It was over. As officers moved in to take her away, Kehlani finally turned to face the cameras. The world had been watching her since the moment she was arrested, dissecting her every move, waiting for some sign of regret. Some sign of sorrow. But instead, she gave them something else. A small smile. And then, as the cameras flashed, she whispered one final sentence before disappearing through the courtroom doors. I gave them a honeymoon to die for. Love can make people do unimaginable things. It can build empires, mend broken hearts, and inspire the grandest gestures of devotion. But when love is betrayed, when trust is shattered beyond repair, it can also destroy. Kehlani Briscoe was a woman who had it all. Wealth, success, and the kind of love story that people envied. She built herself from the ground up, refusing to let anyone take advantage of her. But in the end, it wasn't her enemies who brought her down, it was the two people she trusted the most. Her best friend. Her husband. The betrayal was more than a moment of weakness. It was a calculated deception, a 2-year affair that unfolded right under her nose. And when the truth came to light, it wasn't just a marriage that ended that night in Bali. It was 3 lives, 1 lost to rage, 2 lost to the grave, and 1 doomed to a lifetime behind bars. But the question remains, was Kehlani a woman driven to the edge, blinded by heartbreak and fury? Or was she always capable of this level of violence, waiting for the right moment to unleash it? Some believe she snapped, that she was pushed beyond her breaking point by the ultimate betrayal. Others see her as cold and calculated, a woman who refused to be humiliated, who turned to murder because she would rather destroy everything than be made a fool. If you were in Kehlani's shoes, what would you have done? Could she have walked away, taken her wealth and dignity, and left them to their own misery? Or was she already too far gone the moment she saw them together? Was this crime an act of uncontrollable passion, or a final display of power? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this case left you speechless, make sure to like this video and subscribe, where love, deception, and betrayal turn fatal.